Well, howdy folks, Happy New Year to everybody. I hope you all had a wonderful Christmas and holiday period and so on, and those of you who celebrate. I had a great time. My two boys came for a couple of days, we hung out, had a load of people around for lunch on Christmas Day, cooked a massive turkey, etc, etc, did the whole thing. So yeah, in recovery mode now. So back to this little project on the VU meters. So two-phase approach here. The first is to see if this new driver board can replace this driver board and drive the existing VU meters properly. If that works okay, then the next will be to remove the VU meters and see if I can do the necessary surgery on them to get them to be the right color and install peak meters and so on. Obviously the mounting holes here are completely different, so we will have to do some hole drilling and metal work, which I really don't like doing because it's all put together. But we have no choice, so we will do that first, and then we will go from there. So I mounted it right here next to the main processor board, since I had space, and I thought if it all doesn't pan out, I'll just revert back and I won't have to go reinstalling the old one. So I'll leave that there until we're happy that this is a goer. So next is to wire it up. The only probably potential negative with the layout here is the signal cabling into the driver board has a short run from the volume control to here. It's going to have a longer run now to get over to here. Still, it's only maybe like, well, there's 12 centimeters, I guess. Okay, so we have a temporary mock-up here to test functionality. So the VU outputs from the new driver go to each of the VU meters. DC power connected. And I've extended, it's just a little bit of a lash up, I've extended the signal input cable from its original point here over to in here where it goes in. And the peak cabling for the peak meters and the lamp backlight, I've just put a bit of heat shrink on them so they don't accidentally touch anything while we get into the major test. So I guess I'll fire up the old signal gen and hook it all up like I did before and see if I can if it drives this VU meter properly. Okay, it looks like we passed the first hurdle. Does seem to drive the VU meters. It's a I would say it drives the needles in a slightly more sluggish fashion than the previous driver, which is kind of nice. I prefer it that way than the fact that it's jumping around all the time. I have a few checks to do because when I set the VU meters to 0 dB at the right voltage level, everything seemed to be okay, but when I connected music up to it, the VU meters didn't register at all. So I had to turn the sensitivity back up again. A little anomaly there I need to work on, but as I say, basically on to the next step. Okay, so I've adjusted them as good as I can. I've connected up the backlight. The backlight seems to work okay. I can't connect up the peak because there's no peak indicators. So next is to take this guy out of here and see, can I take him apart? Well, it doesn't look at the moment like I'll have much success in modifying this VU meter. The way it's built is the back plate here is literally just a light diffuser, which is just held on the back here with some sellotape. And so I'm assuming in here there's one or more LEDs or a strip or whatever to provide a diffused light through this plastic plate. But then unfortunately the actual VU meter itself is a black and blue plastic sheet which is quite firmly glued onto the back here, and so I don't see any way that I could get it off without doing damage to the actual moving coil mechanisms themselves. So that's a bummer. I may just have to live with that for now. I'm not sure what else I could do about it. I'll stop and think for a while, have a cup of tea. Well, never say die. It turns out this is just held across the top with a piece of double stick tape. The rest it just slots in. So As you can see, it's just a stencil, and it has a double stick tape across the top, and it's got little latches on the bottom here that hold it in. So what I now need to figure out is, can I make a duplicate of this in clear plastic with black lines on it? So I think the first thing we'll do is neutralize the sticky tape, and then go and do a scan of this so I have an original life-size version. We'll close this guy down, keep him out of harm's way for the time being. You never know. I'm assuming that since this is all blue, that the LEDs behind here are clear, but I'll put a battery across it or something just to find out before I go any further. So last night I scanned this decal into the old computer, and after 20 minutes of messing around with Photoshop, we have a black and white version on paper. Now the paper is much flimsier than this guy, and so I think what I'll do is, when I cut this out, is I'll stick it to the laminator. So here we go, one laminated VU decal. Let's see how it fits in the meter itself. Oh, I'll buy that. That looks okay by me. And in fact, there was residue from the dual-sided tape left on the back plate here, and that I think is just enough to hold it there. Certainly good enough for us to move on to the next bit, which is to check if this diffuser works the way I think it does, and hopefully it's going to illuminate from the back. But I guess worst case scenario, I can always put some LEDs in the front if I need to. Okay, let's test this guy first. Let's put a little voltage across it and see what it does on its own. Well guys, as you can see, the diffuser at the back is obviously blue LEDs. So I was kind of hoping it'd be like a clear backlight shining through a blue decal, but it's blue, but it's nowhere near as blue. So I'm tempted to just run with it like that, because it's quite a low level, which is nice, because I usually listen to music in the dark or in a low light in the evening time, and so I think this will be okay. I think it's good enough to I mean, I can turn it up a lot brighter than this if I want to, but I'd say we're okay. I'll give it a quick tweak just so we can have a look and see what happens. Yeah, we can make it as bright as we want here, but I think so long as I have it just sort of lit, that should be okay. Another potential positive I noticed is, by great good fortune, I'm not quite sure why, but the wooden support which holds the VU meter against the frame is actually off center. So if I put a peak meter LED here in the center, it should not be obstructed at the back. And so what I'm thinking here is I may just put one LED and then just set the peak from either the left or the right channel, rather than try and finagle two LEDs in there. I think that would be acceptable, because the other thing I don't want is when I'm listening to music that this LED keeps flashing and being a distraction. Okay guys, I think I have it where I want it at this point. It's not ideal, because I think part of the problem is I'm driving the controller board with 9 volts, or even a bit less, and it needs 12. And so I've set it so that it's not quite so sensitive at the low signal levels, but then it doesn't go nuts when you get to a strong signal level. So, and it's not like I need it to be accurate for recording or anything, so I think it's good enough. And so we'll think a little bit on how to do the peak meter at this point. So while waiting for my replacement LEDs to arrive, I've been thinking a little bit about how exactly to drive them. Based on my reading up, the best way to drive them is in series. However, the voltage you need to drive them depends obviously on the voltage drop, the forward voltage of each diode, and they vary quite a lot. So just looking in my sort of box of diodes, LEDs, these white ones have a forward voltage of about 3 volts, just under 3, 2.9 something. This red one is 1.9 something, so is this red one. And then just to really throw it off altogether, these little mini 3mm LED that I have, and I got a bunch of those, they show up as just under the 2 volts, but for some reason in my component tester all of these little guys show up as a double diode with diode in each direction, but they work, so I'm not sure what's happening there. Anyway, the diodes that I've ordered are obviously clear, so that means I should count on about a 3 volt drop on each diode. The benefit of running them in series is they'll all have the same current, and the luminosity is directly related to the current. So this is your best way of guaranteeing that all 3 LEDs have the same brightness. However, that means I would need about 9 volts here, and I don't have 9 volts. I'm running this whole thing off about 6 volts, which probably explains why the VU driver circuit is operating a little bit non-linearly. And so if I drive them in parallel, the LEDs in parallel, then they'll have the same voltage drop across each one, but they will each then draw their own current depending on any variances in the individual voltage drops and whatever. So there's a risk of, the 3 of them being a different level of luminosity. But I need much less volts to drive them like this. I think we'll do some experimenting when the actual LEDs arrive. The other thing I'm seriously thinking about now is I may need to add to my power supply so that I can have a 6 volt rail for all the switching stuff, and then I can have at least a 9 or even 12 volt rail for the actual little control unit and the VU driver. That should be fairly easy to do. Unfortunately, the ideal space to mount it would be where I've put the driver board. So anyway, we'll think some more on that. I'll wait until the LEDs come and we'll do some testing and experimenting to see how what's the best way to drive them, and we'll go from there. So 24 hours later, we have some diodes, some LEDs. So initial results with the 3 LEDs in series and like a 100 ohm resistor just for protection, shall we say, in series. At 6 volts, it's not enough to light the diodes. We go to 7, they just start to glow, and at 8 or 9, we're in good shape. So split power supply is looking more attractive. Okay, we're going to try the parallel setup. Okay, so it looks like 40 wiring in parallel is where we're going to go, with 3 of them in parallel and a 330 ohm resistor. 2.7 volts will fire them up. 1.8 will not. So anything from 2.7 up should do the trick. And since my variable voltage is anywhere from, I don't know, something like half a volt up to the maximum, which would be 6, we should be good. Okay, design established, we'll now go and implement. Right, so there we are, all wired in, all wired in. I put a little bit of insulation tape along the bottom there, because the wiring for the LEDs is very close to the case, and better safe than sorry, I think. Okay, so at this point to test, we might be done with this phase of the project. I think what I'll do is, once all this is done, we'll call it quits, and then I'll do a separate video where I do all the high frequency response test. Okay, so I think we're done with this phase of the project. This is kind of what I was looking for. So this will do nicely, thank you. And the peak meter works. If I tweak the sensitivity so it's too sensitive, you'll see it come on. Let me see if I'm tweaking the right one here. There we go. Hope that shows up on the camera, but just to show I can set the old peak meter. We'll tweak it a little bit more accurately a bit later. And yeah, it's a lot of work to get to this, but at one point I was debating whether I should just abandon it and put it back to it was and leave everything. But then I was watching Jorn One's, good old John's update on his jukebox project, and at one point he said, well, I'm retired and I have all the time I need. And I thought, me too. So take all the time you need and get it done the way you want it. So it's getting there. So I hope you found at least some of this interesting along the way. Not sure how often this project like this would need to be replicated, but it's certainly interesting for me. I'm very pleased with the fact that I was able to completely replace the back panel with a white one and light it from the front, so it's now set up essentially the same way as the Marantz cassette player, which is nice. And yeah, if you hung in there till the end without skipping right up to the end, then well done, well done. I'll call it a stop here, and the next project up should be fairly short, because all I'm going to do is rig it up to do a whole lot of measurements against the different high-end, especially the high-end frequencies, to test whether the impedance of this guy is having an impact on the high frequency response. As I said before, I haven't been able to detect anything from my hearing, but always good to do a scientific check and see. That's next. More to come, guys. Cheers for now. Bye.